I love camping. There's something about escaping the noise of the city, sitting around a fire, and getting lost in the wilderness that always felt peaceful to me. But after what happened last summer, I don't think I'll ever go camping again. This is the story of how my friends and I learned the terrifying truth about a place no one should ever visit. It started as a regular trip. Me, my 3 closest friends, Lisa, Mark, and Emily, planned a weekend getaway into Black Hollow Forest. It was a place we found online, supposedly untouched and perfect for camping. The only strange thing was the lack of reviews. Aside from a few vague mentions on obscure forums, no one seemed to have actually camped there. We packed our gear and drove out early Friday afternoon, eager to spend 2 nights away from civilization. The road leading into Black Hollow was eerily empty. No other cars, no signs of campers or hikers. Just miles of dense, towering trees. "Are we sure this is the right place?" Lisa asked, peering out the window. Mark, who was driving, nodded. "Yeah, GPS says we're almost there." After another 20 minutes of winding roads, we found a small clearing near a lake. It was beautiful. Too beautiful, almost. The kind of place you'd see in a travel brochure but never expect to find in real life. The water was unnaturally still, and the air was dead quiet. No birds, no rustling leaves, just silence. We set up our tents, built a fire, and spent the evening telling stories and roasting marshmallows. As the night deepened, Lisa swore she heard something moving in the trees. We brushed it off as her imagination. We were in the middle of a forest, after all. There were bound to be animals. At around midnight, we all turned in for the night. Emily and Lisa shared a tent, while Mark and I had our own. I fell asleep almost immediately. When I woke up the next morning, I heard Lisa screaming. I shot out of my tent, heart pounding. Mark was already outside, looking just as confused as I was. "Emily's gone!" Lisa was in a panic. "Her tent, it's gone too!" I froze. Gone? I turned to where Emily's tent had been. Nothing. Not collapsed, not torn apart, just gone, as if it had never been there in the first place. The only thing left was a dark patch of dirt. We searched the area frantically, calling Emily's name, but there was no sign of her. No footprints leading away, no sign of a struggle, nothing. That's when Mark noticed something carved into a nearby tree. A strange symbol. 3 jagged lines intersecting a circle. Lisa ran her hands over the carving, her breath shaky. "What does this mean?" "I don't know," I said, but something about it made my stomach turn. We spent the rest of the day searching. Mark suggested splitting up to cover more ground, but Lisa refused. "No way," she said. "Something's wrong here. Emily wouldn't just wander off. We need to stay together." The deeper we went into the forest, the more symbols we found. Some on trees, others on rocks. It was like a trail leading somewhere, but we had no idea where. Then Lisa stopped walking. "Do you hear that?" At first I thought she was imagining it, but then I heard it too. A faint whispering. It didn't sound like wind or animals. It sounded like voices, hushed and urgent. "Let's get back to camp," Mark said, his voice unsteady. We hurried back as the sun dipped lower. That night the atmosphere was different. The air felt heavy, suffocating. None of us wanted to admit it, but we were all terrified. We sat around the fire, barely speaking. Then Mark's flashlight flickered and I saw it. A figure standing at the edge of the trees. I jumped up, heart hammering. "Did you see that?" Lisa and Mark turned, but the figure was gone. "See what?" Lisa asked. I hesitated. I swear, someone was standing there. We didn't sleep that night. The whispering grew louder, surrounding our camp. Then around 3 a.m., Mark stood up suddenly. "I need to get out of here," he said. "I can't stay here anymore." He grabbed his flashlight and bolted toward the car. We ran after him, but he was too fast. Then, just as he reached the trail, he vanished. One second he was there, the next he was gone. No sound, no movement, just gone. His flashlight lay on the ground, still on, spinning in slow circles. Lisa let out a choked sob. We're gonna die here. We need to find help, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We followed the symbols. They led us to a cave hidden deep within the forest. Inside, the walls were covered in carvings, the same symbols we had seen on the trees. But there were other things too. Old, rotting tents, torn sleeping bags, camping gear, and a journal. I picked it up and flipped through the pages. It belonged to someone named Daniel Carter who had camped here years ago. His entries described the same things: whispers, missing friends, symbols appearing out of nowhere. His last entry sent chills down my spine. The more you search, the closer it gets. A noise behind us made Lisa scream. We spun around. Nothing. "Let's go," I whispered. We ran. As fast as we could, back toward the car, toward the road, away from whatever was lurking in the forest. Lisa was right behind me. Then she wasn't. I turned back, she was gone. I was the only one left. I reached the car, barely able to breathe. I fumbled with the keys, yanked the door open and jumped inside. I turned the rearview mirror and froze. Emily was sitting in the back seat, pale, expressionless, eyes locked onto mine. Then she opened her mouth, but the sound that came out wasn't human. The last thing I remember was screaming. A week later, authorities found my car abandoned on the side of the road. There was no sign of me or my friends. The official report says we were lost in the wilderness, but I know the truth. No one ever camps in Black Hollow twice, because once it finds you, it never lets you leave. It was supposed to be another peaceful solo hike, a weekend getaway where I could escape the chaos of daily life and reconnect with nature. I've always been someone who prefers the solitude of the wilderness. I enjoy the quiet, the serenity, the way the world seems to slow down when you're surrounded by nothing but trees, rocks, and streams. It's a way for me to clear my head, to find peace. But that was before last fall, before I made the mistake of hiking through a remote forest in Oregon. I hadn't gone back to the trails since then, and after what happened, I don't think I ever will again. The forest I chose to hike in was known for being secluded, a place that had been abandoned for decades. Most people stayed away and the trails were mostly unmarked, perfect for someone like me who preferred to be alone, away from crowds, and lost in the silence of the woods. I had spent weeks planning my route, carefully mapping out where I'd go, where I'd camp, and what I'd need for the journey. My plan was simple: hike in for the first day, camp overnight, then hike back the next day. Nothing extravagant, just me and the wilderness. The first day of the hike was uneventful. The weather was perfect, cool but not too cold, the sun shining down through the trees, a slight breeze rustling the leaves above. I walked for hours, not seeing another soul. It was exactly what I wanted. I found a peaceful clearing near a stream, set up my camp, and built a small fire. I ate my meal, sat back, and listened to the wind, feeling at peace with the world. But as the sun began to set, something caught my eye. Across the clearing, just beyond the trees, I noticed something. It wasn't much, just a dark shape hidden between the trunks. A building? It looked like a cabin, but it was too far away to make out clearly. It didn't seem to fit in with the natural surroundings, like it didn't belong. Curiosity got the better of me. I had nothing to lose, so I decided to check it out before it got too dark. The closer I got, the more I realized how old and decayed the structure was. The wood was blackened by age, the windows shattered, the roof caving in places. There was no trail leading to it, no signs of anyone having been here for years. It was the kind of place you'd expect to find in a ghost story, something out of a horror movie. But I wasn't one to be easily frightened, especially not out here alone. I stepped inside. The air was thick with dust and the floor creaked under my boots. Cobwebs hung from every corner and everything smelled like rot and mildew. It was clear this place had been abandoned for a long time, but as I explored, I noticed something strange. The walls were covered in photographs. tacked onto the wood, covering nearly every inch of the space, were pictures. Dozens, maybe hundreds of them. At first I thought they were just old snapshots from the past, remnants of the people who had lived here long ago. But as I moved closer, I realized that some of them were more recent. I picked one up at random. It was black and white, the edges faded with time. It showed a man sleeping in a tent, his face peaceful, unaware. There was nothing particularly strange about it, just a simple photograph of someone camping, probably taken years ago. But then I picked up another one, this one in color. It showed a woman lying in a sleeping bag, her eyes closed, her face relaxed. It was more recent, but still nothing that raised any immediate alarms. Then I saw it. A photograph near the bottom of the wall. I almost didn't notice it at first, but something about it caught my attention. The tent in the picture, it looked familiar. Too familiar. It was mine. I stood frozen, staring at the photo. The angle was different, the lighting was off, but there was no mistaking it. The tent in the picture was the same one I had set up at my campsite that night. I hadn't taken this photo. I didn't remember anyone being around when I set up camp. The blood drained from my face as I realized what this meant. Someone had been here, watching me. I dropped the photo. My heart was pounding now, my pulse racing as I looked around the cabin, my mind racing to make sense of what I was seeing. Maybe this was just some sick joke. Maybe someone had followed me out here to mess with me. But then I heard it. Footsteps. Not mine. Fresh ones. I could hear them moving in the dust. Just a few steps, soft and careful, like someone was standing behind me. I didn't wait around to find out who. I bolted out of the cabin, my heart hammering in my chest. I didn't care about the photos or the strange feeling creeping up my spine. All I wanted was to get back to camp and get the hell out of there. But I didn't want to make any noise. If someone was following me, I had to be careful. I moved as quietly as I could, trying to blend into the shadows, keeping my flashlight off, listening for any sounds in the woods around me. For a while there was nothing, just the rustling of the wind and the distant call of an owl. Maybe I had overreacted. Maybe I was just letting my imagination get the better of me. But then, I heard it again, a rustling, but this time it came from above me. I froze in place, the hair on the back of my neck standing on end. Slowly, I tilted my head back, my flashlight trembling in my hand as I aimed it up into the trees. And there he was, a figure crouched on a thick branch, his fingers gripping the bark, his body unnaturally still. His face was pale, almost ghostly, his eyes wide and unblinking. He stared down at me, his head tilted slightly, as if he was studying me, trying to figure me out. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. It felt like time had stopped, like I was trapped in some nightmare that I couldn't escape. And then he did something I'll never forget. He smiled. It was slow, deliberate, stretching across his face in a way that didn't seem natural. It was the kind of smile that made your skin crawl, the kind that made you feel like prey. I took a step back, my legs shaking, and broke eye contact for a split second. When I looked back, he was gone. I didn't wait around to see where he went. I turned and ran. I didn't care about the gear I left behind, about the tent or the fire. I just ran, pushing myself through the underbrush, trying to get to the car as fast as I could. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I couldn't stop. Behind me, I heard movement. Not footsteps this time. Rustling. It was coming from above me. He was following me. I ran faster, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath coming in short gasps. My car wasn't far. I could make it. And then, just as I burst through the tree line and saw my car ahead, something fluttered in the air beside me. A piece of paper.